China, the third most biggest country in size but largest in people, with over one-fifth of Earth's population. For thousands of years, emperors and dynasty ruled. China developed its own ways and customs in relative isolation. The major belief system was Confucianism, which stretched morals but also allows inequalities in society to be justified. Millions of Chinese people were starving, illiterate peasants with no land and no rights. By 1912, the modern times had finally come. A revolution has replaced the last emperor who was child with the president Sun Yat-sen. Sun Yat-sen, who was in the United States during the revolution, returned chosen head of the provisional government of the Republic of China in Nanjing. As leader of Kuomintang or Nationalist Party, Sun was elected provisional president of the newly declared republic but was forced to resign in 1912. In 1913, his disagreements with government policies led Sun to organize a second revolution. Failing to regain power, Sun left once again for Japan, where he organized a separate government. Sun returned to China and attempted to set up a new government in the 1917 and 1921, before successfully installing himself as a generalissimo of a new regime in 1923. With the North warlord and their armies still controls a lot of lands and power, most people were not helped much by the new government. So on May 4, 1919, many students rose up to reform, including a former soldier, peasant, and librarian, Mao Zedong. The May 4th movement, which grew out of the student uprising, attacked Confucianism, initiated a vernacular style of writing, and promoted science. Scholars of international stature such as John Dewey and Bertrand Russell were invited to lecture. Numerous magazines were published to stimulate new thoughts. Towards the end of the movement's existence, a split occurred among its leaders. Inspired by the recent Russian Revolution, Mao and few others went up to the countryside to help peasants organize a better life with communism. At first, Sun Yat-sen helped at the new growing communist group to help defeat the warlord and build a new China together. Sun Yat-sen, whose power base was in the south, had planned to send an expedition against the North warlords, but he died before it could get underway.
The next leader of KMT, Chiang Kai-shek, wanted to get rid of the communists and the warlords. So most of the 1920s were the battles of three groups: the warlords, the Communist Party of China, and Chiang Kai-shek's. By 1931, the warlords and the communists were losing, but then the Japanese attacked China, causing more catastrophe. By 1934, despite the Japanese violation, the Kuomintang had the last communist group surrounded and almost erased them. But hundreds of thousands of communists escaped on foot, evading the warlords, the Japanese and the Kuomintang troops that chased them. This retreat was known as the Long March. Crossed a distance much larger than America, only Mao and a few thousands were left when the march was ended. Along their way, they treated people well and gave them land. So the news spread that communism was for the good of the common people, with the support of the peasants, but with no larger force. They couldn't fight in a normal manner. They started to develop so-called guerrilla tactics, still used by small forces up to this day. When World War II broke out, Japan battled China. China's forces suffered but now fought on with this new guerrilla way. In 1945, Japan completely surrendered, faced with the terrible atomic devastation, and after the pullout of Japanese troops, Chinese civil war soon resumed. But the Kuomintang was worn out and the communists gained more support from the population. They were able to defeat Chiang's forces. He fled from mainland to Taiwan, and China's 37 years of revolution and civil war was finally over. October 19, 1949, the People's Republic of China was finally declared.
A communist country under the leadership of Mao Zedong. First, they got rid of about 1 million landlords and gave everybody land. Next, they made China's elite language simpler so that everybody could be educated. With the help from the Soviet Union, China's backward industry and shattered economy started to improve in a tremendous rate. And now, Mao, renowned leader and a poet, he said he wanted to let 100 flowers bloom, meaning more free thoughts and more free expression. But he was so respected and feared, nobody could tell him no, and he was starting to have weird bad ideas for the nation. On 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward, a massive unrealistic attempt to make communes and industry modernize much faster. But with poor planning and bad weather, the economy crumbled and millions of people starved. There was a tremendous policy disaster. After the failure of the Great Leap, China stopped getting support from the Soviet Union. Mao, having more enemy and starting to get unfixed, his next idea to renew the enthusiasm of the people was with the youth, and he started the Cultural Revolution in 1966. It was one of the strangest upheaval in the political history. Millions of Red Guards with Mao's Red Books attacked teachers, attacked historic sites, attacked government officials, and then attacked each other. So there was no university for about 4 years. China's whole economy and culture was chaotic. Millions worshipped Mao, but even this has come to a confused idea when Mao had to call off the Cultural Revolution and bring in the army to put a stop to it. Only slowly did China begin to recover. By then, Mao was old and ill. Zhao and Lai seemed to have emerged as the nation's real leader when relations were established with the United States. Mao's personality cult remained strong until his death in September 9, 1976. Shortly afterwards, however, a power struggle was underway. Members of the party who had been purged by the Cultural Revolution returned to govern China. Chief among them was Deng Xiaoping.
Deng Xiaoping. During the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s, China's communist government publicly humiliated Deng Xiaoping by parading him through the national capital in a Jude's cup. Yet, after the death of Zhao Enlai and Mao Zedong in 1976, he emerged as his country's paramount leader. Whether in exile or in power, Deng was long acclaimed as a reformer who resisted rigid communist ideology. But his image was tarnished in mid-1989 when he ordered a military crackdown on the student pro-democracy movement. At the same time, the government began to build a personality cult around the aging, ailing survivor of purges who had once belied the similar deification of Mao. Deng Xiaoping was born on August 22, 1904, to a wealthy family in Sichuan province. At age 16, he went to Paris to study. While there he was befriended by Zhao. After he returned home in 1924, Deng joined the Communist Party and was sent to the Soviet Union for another year of study. In the political movement led by Mao, he started out as an underground organizer. He participated in the Long March of 1934 to 1935. Deng became a vice premier in 1952, the party secretary in 1954, and a member of the ruling Politburo in 1955. During the Cultural Revolution, radical Maoists condemned him as a bourgeois freak, and in 1973 he was rehabilitated under Zhao and as the most senior vice premier became the effective head of the government during Zhao's later illness. But Mao's supporters were alarmed by his efforts to promote economic reform through capitalist methods of production.
Instead of succeeding Zhao when the premier died, Deng was banished by the Radical Gang of Four, an elite group of Mao's supporters led by Mao's wife, Jiang Qing. Today, China is still trying to reconcile the good aspect of communism and capitalism with an uncertain future for this ancient giant country.